So I'm going to give you another example of this. My sister called me one day and she says, I'm in a little tiff with my mother-in-law and I'm just conscious enough to know that I'm probably a part of the problem and I'm willing to look at it. So will you help me with it? And I said, okay, what's going on? And she said, every year at Thanksgiving on Greg's side of the family, which is her husband, we take turns on who's going to host the dinner. And she said, this year I volunteered to do it. And I said, so what's the problem? And she said, well, I asked my mother-in-law what time they'd leave that day. Now, I want you to know that my sister, she likes to come to my house on Thanksgiving because we do games after everyone's had their dinners around 7 o'clock. And so she had that in the back of her mind, but she hadn't told anybody that. So even though she'd volunteered for the dinner, she started asking her mother-in-law, hey, what time do you guys think you're going to leave? What time do you guys think you'll be ready to clear out? And her mother-in-law's like, why do I have to tell you that? You know? And my sister got defensive and said, well, what's wrong with asking that? I've agreed to cook the dinner, haven't I? And they're getting into this little squabble. And so about then, my sister launches into this rant about, my mother-in-law is always trying to control me. I don't know why she won't cooperate with me. And she's all upset about it. And I said, okay, first of all, let's just slow down and look at this. Did you even want to do Thanksgiving? And she paused and said, well, I thought I should. Now, whenever we say I should, I have to, I ought to, I need to, I'm supposed to, I will try, or I can't, those are just clues that we're in the other directed belief system. So what I want to share with you is the other side of that personal responsibility chart. And when I do, we'll continue this story. Now I'm going to talk about the self-directed side of this model. This is whenever we remember that we always have autonomy, we always have power and choice. We have these even under the most dire circumstances. There are stories about people in Auschwitz, Germany, in the concentration camps who exercised the use of their power within, even in those conditions. Because we always have choice. We choose what we're going to cause, what we're going to feel, who we're going to be, what we're showing up for. Think about Nelson Mandela, who went through 28 years of imprisonment and didn't lose his mind. He came out a strong leader. When I remember that I have choices, one attitude I can take, which is a response as opposed to a reaction to an authority figure, is that I can agree to do something. But when I agree from this side, I'm actually aware of all the consequences and I'm willing to accept all of them. And I have a feeling of responsibility for the task, for the relationship, for my own mood, and all other outcomes. And that's really what it means to be accountable. We can't truly hold other people accountable because accountability is an inside job. Accountability is when my beliefs, my attitudes, my responses, my feelings, and my behavior all line up. And when I'm in that place, I mean what I say and I say what I mean. That's what it means to be in alignment. When you think about your life, if you find yourself thinking, I ought to, I should, I need to, I have to, you just haven't made sure that you're making decisions from this self-directed side. That's all that means. It doesn't even mean no or yes yet, because you've not taken the time to consider some of the important things. And those phrases are a good clue to watch for along with your body language and your tone of voice. When I'm in this self-directed side, I can also say no or disagree. And I'm also willing to consider and accept all the consequences of that decision. For example, sometimes we say no to something because of our priorities or because it conflicts with our own value system, and our decision is for our reasons, not in reaction against someone else. It may just be the right or fair thing to do, but we're coming from this more mature self, not from that fearful, disempowered, and power under self. So if you notice, agree and disagree look a lot like comply and rebel on the surface, right? The behavior. If I agree to clean the room or I comply resentfully with cleaning the room's getting cleaned. But those two decisions feel very different. When someone is rebelling or complying resentfully, everyone can feel it if they even tune in a little. You can see it in the body language and the tone of voice, in addition to the words that I mentioned about I have to or I should. It sounds like, all right, fine, I'll do it. And you're aware on some level, even if it's often unconscious, okay, I'm going to get about 50% output. And often we settle for that. What's different is not exactly about the behavior, it's about the intention behind the behavior and the centeredness behind it or the lack thereof. In other directed, there's self-betrayal and everyone pays a price, even though it can even appear noble sometimes. So when we're in self-directed mind, we can either agree or disagree, but we also have what's called third option, which stands for multiple options, even beyond three. Because we're not in knee-jerk reactions. We're doing instead thoughtful, mindful contemplation in this mindset. And all that means is that I'm pausing just a breath to ask myself, what am I feeling and what do I want? And then we can create other options that aren't necessarily yes or no. So my sister, what happened with her is that when I asked her, did you really want to do Thanksgiving this year? And she said, well, I thought I should. I said, let's just pretend you haven't made the decision yet and that you're still in the deciding place. So just take a breath and ask yourself, what do I feel about this? What do I want? And she said, I realize I really do want to do the dinner, but I'm also conscious in this moment that I want to do it only if everyone's out of the house by 6:30 so I can make it to your house for game night. Like she'd forgotten to notice that. And if she had noticed it, she could have said to her husband's family, you know what, I'd really love to have it at my house this year, but only if it could be done by 6:30 or if you guys would agree to continue the party at that time without me. The point is that she would have been fully accountable and all of them could have then negotiated a solution that would work for all of them. And if it didn't work for her to do the holiday, maybe someone else would take it on. But do you see how different it would go? But what was happening is that on some level, my sister wasn't feeling great about her decision. She was feeling victimized by it and by her mother-in-law, and she was resentful about it. So when we're in the other directed side, we're self-betraying. And when we do that, we always distort the facts. We demonize others and we martyr or rile ourselves up. The reason we call the feelings a blind spot is really obvious in this example with my sister. She was the author of the problems because she wasn't deciding from self-directed, but she couldn't see that she was the author of this squabble. She thought that it was her mother-in-law that was causing the problem. And this goes on all the time unless we have conscious self and relationship awareness.